Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Ape Canyon. And this is from director Joshua Land, starring Jackson Trent as a young man named Cal, who, dealing with the loss of some of his family, convinces his older sister, played by Anna Fagan, to go on an expedition to find Bigfoot. And that's going off to Ape Canyon. He's on this expedition with a young Jewish kid, a relatively new couple, and a man who is leading this expedition. And we start off this film and it has this fun, quirky kind of atmosphere. It has a fun premise and idea. Oh, we're going to be trying to hunt after Bigfoot. And it sets up this expectation that you're going to find these quirky interactions and awkward interactions between this group of people. And maybe along the line you're going to see this brother and sister grow their bond together, which seems to be a little bit thin and stretched out at this point. And for a bit, that is what we get. And then it starts taking an interesting turn. And before that, the tone feels very fitting to this silly kind of expedition idea. It has a really good use of music, and it gets you involved into the story. And there's even some fun animation thrown in to set up some exposition about Ape Canyon and why it's relevant to Bigfoot. And at first you feel like, oh, this is pretty respectful to the idea of people believing in Bigfoot and chasing after this, because that's the thing. Like, for me, personally, I wouldn't be surprised. Would not be surprised if it turned out that there's some kind of creature like that. A lot of people think it's a crock of you-know-what. And this film, at first, a lot of me talking about at first, because I feel like the first act is very different than the rest of the movie, is setting up this respectful kind of look at it. And, we're seeing it through Cal, and it's feeling pretty predictable. And then things start going awry. And the story starts shifting and becomes really erratic and feels very episodic and choppy. For an hour and 13-minute film, that's a little uncomfortable and awkward because you're never really setting up the pace and the flow of the film. And you have these increasingly more ridiculous set pieces. Cal becomes more and more of a really obnoxious and unlikable character. And honestly, throughout this film, I was not a huge fan of him. And we're getting up to this point because there's hints of that even before this film takes a turn. And from a filmmaking perspective, there's some interesting long shots and different stuff like that to keep it fresh. But you have a very mixed bag of characters because some of them feel like awkward, just flat kinds of caricatures, and some of them feel like fun, inspired characters. Cal, though, is a really unlikable protagonist, and I didn't really feel invested. And there's moments later in the film where he really gets emotional and open about what he's going through, and I never really bought it. This is like, at one point it turns into this like big cop chase, and the search for these fugitives, which is Cal and his sister. And like where something like Hunt for the Wilder People is able to balance that kind of tone and everything. This is no Taika Waititi here making this film. It feels very awkward and tonally unbalanced and sends us awry. And I feel a lot less invested in the story as the film was going on. And basically it just goes off the rails. The emotional punches don't really land. And Jackson Trent, like, I never really bought into his performance as Cal either. It just feels very awkward and doesn't necessarily feel believable. And you have Anna Fagan, who's doing her best with trying to play her part in this, which is like the more straight-laced sister. And through all the nonsense, I feel like this film, at the very end, the last 30 seconds, 40 seconds or so, really elevates itself and has this really moving final frame, and I'm just like, where could that have been the whole rest of this film? Obviously, it ends on a really awesome high note with those final less than a minute, But in general, I feel like the whole film is really hit or miss in terms of story and character and tone and basically everything. It's a really imbalanced film, and by the end, I felt like I got some enjoyment of it. There's definitely some admirable things about it, but when it really comes down to it, this script from Harrison Demchick just felt like it was all over the place, and I never could really connect with Cal, nor did I really want to. I didn't like him very much. But in all, don't know if this is one that I would definitely say, go check this out. It is an hour and 13 minutes, so it's not the biggest investment, but it might not give you the satisfaction you're hoping out of this story and this concept. But those are my thoughts on Ape Canyon. Let me know what you think, and let's talk some movies. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.